All right, so today we're going to talk a little bit about defense mechanisms, but in a bit of a different way. So everyone has defenses. Everyone has things that they do to protect themselves. And the way I talk about this at NOM, and that we talk about this at NOM, is really, we call it core programming. And I know at another time, in another lecture, you guys have heard about, or will have heard about, defense mechanisms. I'm a simple person, and I like to understand things simply. That's my family doctor training. It doesn't mean family doctor is simple. That means that if you want to have lots of knowledge about lots of things, you need to be able to condense it to what's relevant and important for making decisions. So, the whole thing that makes... So today's about core programming and how you can begin to shift a core program. But first you need to know that it exists. And if you don't know that it exists, it will increase the length of time in your therapy sort of time period by 10 or 100-fold. I've met lots of people who come, they do 1 or 2 sessions with us the way we do things here, and they're like, I've been going to a psychoanalysis for 10 years, and I haven't made even a quarter of this much progress. Why? Because this concept of core. So everyone has a core program. If your core programming has landed you in a place where you need help with mental health, addiction, chronic things, chances are that you have a core program that has some issues in it. There's some of it's good, maybe much of it is good, but some of it is not quite operating well. So, core program with defects. And so what happens when a core program's defects are exposed? Pain. And that's basically the best way to say it. When something touches your core program, brings it to the surface, and there's a defect, it hurts. It's emotional, it ruins your day, it ruins your week, makes you punch a wall. And so what we do as humans, just like any mammal or any animal, we learn every time that happens. So you get pain, that's basically, body's like that, never happen that again. Never gonna do that again. And so then thing after thing happens, and either a new defense is formed or an old defense is strengthened. So maybe at this point, this defense gets really strong. Or maybe a new strategy is evolved. But day after day, week after week, month after month, and your body forgets nothing. Your mind forgets nothing. You think you don't remember what happened 20 years ago, 20 years in one day. Well, guess what? Some part of your mind and body absolutely knows exactly what went down when. There is no forgetting, absolutely none. There is only storage. Storage and protection. And so we have many ways of storing. Some of those ways of storing information create the need for chronic, for example, substance use. It's a strategy. It's a strategy to alter reality, to make reality more palatable. I just like to smoke some weed, someone might say. And that's cool. I got nothing against weed. Nothing at all. Legalize it all. I'm an addiction doctor. Legalize it all, as far as I'm concerned. Because supply side, the war on drugs has always failed, will always fail, because supply side interventions will never work. Drug dealers are too smart. Police can't keep up with them. Demand side interventions, that's what NOM's all about. Those will always work. If you make reality more palatable, if you make it so that you don't need as many defenses, people will stop using drugs. Absolutely. Life is too awesome to distort with drugs. That's the solution. So, a core program with defects, protected with defenses, every painful episode, strengthen a defense or evolve a new defense. By the time people become adults, they usually have at least 5 to 10 major strategies, and those strategies have been reinforced millions of times, maybe millions of times. And so this is what makes addiction mental health so murky. Because depending on the character of this, it's some mix of labels. And those labels are many things. If you ask a psychiatrist, heck, if you ask 5 psychiatrists, you may get 5 different labels. And I'm a big believer in it takes a village. I believe in psychiatry. I believe there's a role for everyone. I don't tell nobody not to get help from nobody. Get help. It takes a village. Go anywhere that you think is helpful. So, depending on where you go, you might get a bunch of labels. Personality disorders, depression, anxiety, etc., etc. And so that's all fair. But what we're going to talk today is about treatment. How do you address this? What can you change? And so, there's ways in which our core programming is developed. It's developed based on reaction to our environment, and so therefore it's encoded in the same way as our environment, which means a couple of things. Usually it's in English, unless that's not the language that you were born in. If you're 5 years old before you come to Canada, or 10 years old, it's encoded in the language and culture and religion, etc., gender. These mechanisms are all encoded in a certain set of experiences. And so what that means is these certain things will trigger the defenses, certain things will relax the defenses. It's very important that you understand how to relax the defenses. But that most people don't encounter. Most people don't have any particular strategy of doing that. So the defenses are encoded in a certain, for example, language. Let's say your defenses are encoded in certain kinds of self-talk. And anytime you encounter, I meet a lot of people who addiction, alcohol, who really don't like to go to AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, and usually what it is the God thing. They don't want to be preached at by the God thing. And AA is definitely heavy on the God thing. So what's actually happening? Well, for example, if one of those many myriad of experiences being brought up in a harshly religious and at times hypocritical, do as I say, don't not as I do, God's great and all that, and beat your kids, or force them to do stuff, then the mind will link that. And so then the God thing will become not relaxing, it will actually be triggering. So that's just an example of how other things can be triggering. Someone actually said something really insightful to me. As a therapist, we all are taught as therapists, don't caretake for someone. But very few people know why. Why don't you want to try to take care of someone or help them more than they want to help themselves. I'll tell you the secret. This took me like a decade to discover, and I'm giving it to you for free. So when you try to look after someone, like their mom or like their dad, guess what? Most people's mom and dad are triggering. they trigger a defense mechanism. And so when you do that, when you sort of engage in the same kind of behavior, if you reflect on some of your relationships in life and think of some of the things that bother you about what someone else does for you, oftentimes some stuff that they do mimic mom or dad or uncle or whoever. And those same behaviors, certainly as a doctor, when I do these behaviors, it activates a defense. Those defenses are of 5 varieties, as you've learned about, right? Fight, flight, freeze, submit, and attachment cry. And it's usually submit and surrender and attachment cries that characterize dysfunctional relationships. And a lot of it has everything to do with simulating that caretaking behavior, that response. So if you want to get beyond that, if you want to heal from that, a lot of this stuff is heavily encoded in language. And so using other ways in order to alter the core programming, you have to penetrate the defenses. I don't like that word, penetrate defenses, but that's usually what's said. Because when you penetrate a defense, it's actually hostile. So a better way is to relax a defense, to put a defense at ease. Hey, some of you may be aware, but there's a fan playing in this room. But until I actually said that, you may have actually forgot there was a fan playing in this room. Our body and our mind ignores repetitive sounds. There's all sorts of sounds. If you just take a brief second and just listen for 5 different sounds that you didn't notice, do it right now. Close your eyes and listen for 5 sounds that you didn't notice before. And just put it on your fingers as soon as you notice 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Just could be anything. Sound of your breath, sound of shifting. We all have, as you put attention to it, actually there's a lot of things that are happening right now. There's probably 100 different sounds if you're very attentive to it. So the thing is that your mind has an ability to tune out sounds, particularly annoying sounds, repetitive sounds. Repetition, how do you sort of avoid interacting with a defense without either activating it? How do you interact with a defense to relax it? Number 1 rule is repetition. We are designed to ignore things that repeat, and basically the mind is like, it's repeating but nothing bad's happening. Notice it for a while and then tune it out. And that helps survival because we are able to sort of put our attention, our consciousness is only limited. We can handle 5 to 10 things, and if that repetitive sound doesn't need to be one of them, put it somewhere else, But that doesn't mean your system's not listening to it. At some point, you're storing all the millions of terabytes of information every second. Your system is downloading it, interacting it, storing it, and processing it as we speak. You're just not aware of it. So repetition doesn't mean ignoring. So if you were to, for example, repeatedly message something to yourself, it would change the defenses. It would relax a few of them. It could be an affirmation. It could be some words. Everyone has some words. It could even be some sounds. A lot of times, that's why people love music. That's why music is a part of so many cultures. Repetitive, relaxing sounds. Not just sounds, sensations. This is why moms rock their babies. Repetition, rhythm. The core programming is mostly in English. The defenses are mostly in English. Core programming is not mostly in English. The defenses are. Invoking multiple aspects of communication. So it's kind of like, hi, how are you? That's one way to communicate that. Same thing, hi, how are you? Another strategy. Third one, hi, how are you? Which one's more effective at communicating the essence? Number 1, 2, or 3? 3. And is it a little, or is it way more effective?
Way more effective.
When you add multiple, so if you dissect that, okay, so what was it about that third one that made it effective?
There's more enthusiasm.
So enthusiasm, I heard another one?
Waving.
Waving. So it was waving. So I can say it was physical. There's a physicality to it. And then I heard enthusiasm. So enthusiasm was an adjustment of the tone. What else? Smiling. Okay, so it wasn't one physicality. It was multiple. How many different muscles do you think I fired in my face to make that happen?
All of them.
A lot. So smiling. So not one physicality, multiple. How many muscles do you think I fired in my hand? Body. If I start dancing. The thing is what you have to understand, when we say communication is 99.9% nonverbal, that's actually quite true. That's why do as I say, not as I do doesn't work. Do is what communicates 99%. What you say communicates 0.1%. More often than not, you're used to people saying one thing and doing another, meaning one thing and saying, and makes you upset. So your defenses get arranged around that. If you sense double speak, that'll put anybody on edge. Oftentimes people's family systems are based on double speak.
What do you mean?
Double speak, meaning saying one thing, doing another. Saying one thing, intending another. Self-serving. So calm you down so that I can have a better day somehow. This not seeking of the win-win in an interaction creates a set of defenses to sort of preserve the self. And that is good for a couple of decades. And at some point, 2 decades, 3 decades, 4 decades, 5 decades, 6 decades, and it bites you in the somewhere. So we have to understand that learning to ease the defenses, because we're not getting rid of anything. No, you can't get rid of anything. It's yours. You have what you have. It's not about getting rid of anything. In fact, I won't even tell you to stop smoking the pot. I'm an addiction doctor. I might tell you not to smoke crack cocaine because it sort of rots your brain. But even that, to be honest, I don't tell people even not to do that. I live your life however you like. But the thing is, learn to relax your defenses. What is this core programming? This core programming, in psychology, a lot of it is encoded in what we call negative cognitions. After the age of 3 or 4, it becomes languaged. But before the age of 3 or 4, it is encoded in feelings, encoded in comforts. It's still encoded. And it's things like, I don't matter. I don't deserve to be here. There's like a million variations on negative self-talk. But it typically is reduced to a simple set of I statements that are devaluing of your existence or being. That's the core program, and there's some good things. It's not all bad. So if there's negative, there's probably some positive too. Actually, definitely there's some positive because you haven't suicided out. Good. Glad. This is why I don't mind if people smoke, do things. At least they're not suicided out. At least they have a chance. Because if you don't have a lot of positive cognitions, you at some point will. And so these are things like I matter, I'm important. And how are these things encoded? There's a lecture on that. Suggest you watch it. It's on development. Basically repetition. The more you hear anything in life, both seeing what people do and observing it as they do as I say, not as I do. It's that do part that codes this. So the more we hear, starting from a young age, of positive, the more stable our core becomes. The less we hear, and usually the magic age is somewhere between 0 to 11. That's when the vast majority of this is established. So in order to, at the age of 50, at the age of 40, at the age of 70, to shift this, at a point when we have a lot of defenses protecting against it, it requires some degree of assistance. Because if it was going to shift on its own, it would have. It shifts through experiences that reinforce the positive or unlearn the negative. So, today we're going to focus on one way to do that. So, we've talked about some characteristics of ways in which we can bypass or augment self-communication. So it works the same way. Believe it or not, you can go in front of a mirror and say, I'm important. Or you can go in front of a mirror and say, I'm important. Believe it or not, which one do you think will have a bigger effect on core programming? First or second?
Second.
It's just neurobiology. More avenues of communication. It's like, stock market. What does your financial person tell you? Diversify, diversify, diversify. Why do they tell you that? Because if one avenue of communication isn't very good, at least you have 4 or 5 others. And the physical is really, really awesome. The physical, this is why yoga works, this is why a lot of these technologies work, is that physicality is an avenue of communication that actually goes way before you are encoded with a lot of the negative stuff. It taps into, right as a fetus. You were there, you had a physicality, physicality is a very positive way. And anything you do associating with muscle movements, so like dancing to a positive song. That's a really great way. Any positive song. Lots of negative songs out there, but a positive song. Everyone has most artists, even like the most droopiest negative of the artists, they usually have at least one positive song. I'm just remembering Tupac. Tupac has a lot of sort of difficult songs, but he has one song that I'll remember forever from childhood, Changes. It's an awesome song. Lots of good positive stuff in that one. So dancing to something like that, that's optimistic, that reinforces some of these positives, is very deeply reprogramming. Once you develop a way to reprogram, it's simply a matter of repetition. Psychology is not complicated, folks. I'm a family doctor, a simple guy. Simply finding something that works and repeating the heck out of it will get you a lot further than reading 50 different self-help books. The question is what's that right thing that's going to sort of allow you in? It's kind of like a keyhole. Random keys don't work. If your lock is very specific, it has to be the right key. It has to be the right look. And what I'm telling you is that it does exist. And so today we're going to combine a couple of different technologies. So this technique, it comes from a couple of different lineages. I call it the PAF or the PMF, a Paper Affirmation Flash Protocol. I also call it the PMF. And so there's a couple of aspects of experience that I should explain. So one is eye position. So a lot of the emerging psychotherapies, I'm talking about EMDR, brain spotting, other things, they take advantage of this thing around the eyes. And it turns out every experience in life has an eye position encoded along with it. So your whole mind is inscribed upon your eyes. Specifically the eye position, corresponding to every memory, every experience in life, there is an association of an eye position. Every defense mechanism has an eye position. Every core sort of negative cognition has an eye position. And if you think of how many different positions the eye can have, it's like hundreds of thousands. Because the mind's a complex thing. So every single one, and you'll find that certain eye positions have multiple experiences stacked on them. So if you look around, if you just take a few seconds to just gaze around, there's some eye positions that you really hate. And just putting your eyes there makes you nauseous, makes you upset, makes you kind of like not that happy. Why? It's just because you've accessed some of that. So you don't stay on that. So what we do in trauma responses is we avoid. So there's some areas in our visual field where we avoid looking. Correspondingly, there are eye positions associated with the positive things too. There's some, when you're enjoying yourself, you're relaxed, your eyes will naturally drift towards certain directions. So this comes from brain spotting, CRM, it comes from EMDR, and believe it or not, yoga. There's yoga sets that sort of use eye positions in order to sort of determine what you work on. So what we do in this is most people with complex trauma and concussions, their minds are full of a lot of things. It's running constantly. Some people call this ADHD. If you have a lot of defense mechanisms, a couple of good head injuries, ADHD is a pretty logical thing that will happen because there's just a lot of stuff going on. Some defense mechanisms, believe it or not, they just throw up random thoughts for no reason, just to distract you from core defects. So the So what we want to do is we want to be able to focus the eyes on certain on reading positive affirmations. What the positive affirmation is for you is going to be different. So that's going to be part of what the workshop is. Most people, pretty much all people, have something that they can say to themselves that helps them relax. It'll be very different for everyone. But once you develop it, then what you can do on a piece of paper, you can just copy it down a few times, maybe 4, 5, 6 times. You can put it in front of your face, and you can begin to read it, word by word. And what you do when you do that is your eye position changes little bit by little bit. If you go slow, you're accessing positive, you're accessing some negative. And every once in a while, maybe every third line, you're going to triple blink. You're going to do flash. Why would we do flash? The reason to do it is simply because the flash, the technology of flash, it's a neurological thing. It clears subconsciously accessed material. So if you're doing something that's relaxing you, that's positive, you can clear stuff that you might have accessed gently, like an onion. Every time you triple blink, you clear a little bit. Now your onion may have like 1,000,000 layers. Every time you triple blink, you may clear a layer or two. So it'll take a while, but it's something that you can do. Most people experience this if they can find the right set of words as relaxing. It doesn't work for everyone, but it works for a lot of folks. So we're going to give it a go. This is the theory behind it. And if you can find the right thing, then you can begin to reprogram. So an example of an affirmation that's not that triggering is "this too shall pass," or "I'm okay." One person, he used the affirmation. So what he would do is he would write, "I'm okay." I'm okay. As odd as it seems, reading something out loud, you use your tongue, you use all those tongue muscles, right? Communication, hi, how are you, right? You use more, you're using your eyes, you're using your ocular muscles, you're incorporating a lot of different aspects of communication. It's not just reading in your mind. In this case, in a group, you're not going to be reading all out together because that'll be like gibberish. You're just going to kind of mouth to yourself. But basically, you find those set of words that make you feel okay. For some people, it's biblical passages. Some people, it's religious mantras. Some people, as horrible as their experience to church may have been, they still like to, say the Lord's Prayer. A lot of people have some kind of access to spirituality. It could be nature related. I love the sun. So, find a phrase. So the steps of the PMF is simply this. Find a phrase that works. Write it down on a piece of paper repetitively. And then every couple of lines, you're going to triple blink. And you're going to... before you sort of write anything down, though, how do you know that a phrase is helpful? This is really important. You should be able to repeat that 4, 5, 6 times, and it should deeply relax you. If it doesn't, it's the wrong phrase. I'll give you a hint. "I am lovable" does not relax most people. That's a really toxic phrase to a lot of people early on in their recovery journey. So it might be some things that are more peripheral, more nature-related. And so, or it might be things in different languages. One person, "I'm okay" triggered the heck out of her, but when she said it in some European language, it was totally relaxing. It was like, oh, it felt so good. So, really stretch your mind a little bit. Try to come up with something that you can repeat to yourself and see if it works. And if you think it works, write it down a few times on a piece of paper. Just read it slowly. So if someone did this, the rate of reading it would be, I'm okay. Taking the time to fix the eyes and consume the information. When you consume it with your eyes, it's just multiple. Your eyes bypass oftentimes a lot of the core defenses. And so going slow also moves the eyes left to right. That causes increasing attention. That's slow bilateral stimulation is known as resourcing. So when we're slow about it, if you're fast about it, your belly's gonna start hurting, you're gonna start crying or something. It's not gonna be that great. So if you're slow, it will reinforce the experience. So it's a complicated. It's not so complicated, really, but it's simply using repetition, affirmations. If it's something rhythmic, like a poem, it can work better. A song. It can be a poem. It can be your favorite bedtime story. You know, some people, they get really relaxed with certain stories. So there's a lot of room for innovation with this. So I'm going to pause this, and then so if you're at home, then you can give it a go, and then we'll do a question and answer. Cut this into. Okay, so just one important point. You have to understand that when you come up with an affirmation, let's say it's I'm having a good day. Okay? Let's say that's your affirmation, or I am my highest self. What your mind, when it sees this, it does not consume it as a sentence. This is important from a brain perspective for you to understand. Your mind works like Google. It consumes every word individually. Okay? Every single word gets consumed individually, out of context. So that's why something that should be relaxing can actually have an opposite effect. We oftentimes don't know what the roots of our trigger is, but the mind works very much like Google. And so if you consume each word individually, maybe the word good is traumatic. So it doesn't matter that this is a neutral statement or a nice statement. Good, if someone in your life belittled you with that word, this, no matter how many times you say it, this isn't going to feel very good. Because that's not how your mind works. Your mind consumes things by breaking them up into the smallest component, out of context. And so that's kind of a very basic mental thing you have to understand about your mind. So I just wanted to add that in.